In this module, we are going to talk about Joan of Arc. So, Joan of Arc is most definitely a very popular figure in French history. Most of you probably have heard of her, and we're going to find out a little bit more about her today. Movies have been written about her. She's had a lot of pop songs written about her. Most recently, if you listen to Arcade Fire, you might know their song Joan of Arc. So let's talk a little bit about the context. So if you remember from the last module, we are in the Hundred Years' War. And the Hundred Years' War is, at its most basic level, a war of the British versus the French. And at this point, the British are winning. If you remember, Charles VI has been conquered. And as his punishment, King Henry of England has taken his daughter for marriage and has also forced Charles to disown his son, disinherit his son. And his son, Charles VII, has fled to the south of France. So at this point, the British have the upper hand. And if you look at the map here, you can see that the parts in pink are the British parts, and the part in blue is the French part. So that's where the son of the king would have gone. And in French, the son of the king is called the Dauphin, which translates to dolphin. I'm not quite sure why that name is used, but anyways, the son of the king is called the Dauphin before he becomes king. So pink parts are British, blue parts are French, and then you see these purple parts, and these purple parts are pretty important. These are the Dukes of Burgundy, and we will be talking about the Dukes of Burgundy a little bit in the next module. We talked about them a little bit in the last module. So the Dukes of Burgundy, what's so special about them is that they have allied themselves with the British. So they are on the British side. So the pink and the purple is basically the British side, and the blue is the French side. So, okay. So the objective, of course, for the French is to reinstate Charles VII as king. So you have the British and the Dukes of Burgundy versus what we call the Armagnac. Okay, so the rest of France. So if you think about it as if it were a game or a movie, the aim is get Charles VII from the south of France to the north of France. And if you look on your map and you look towards the northern part of the pink part, you see a town called Reims, Reims. And this town is very important to France because this town has a cathedral. And in that town, the cathedral is the place where the kings have their coronation. So for Charles VII to be coronated, to become king of France, he needs to go from the south of France to the north of France, to Reims, to be coronated, to be properly coronated as King of France. So the challenge, of course, is to get through the British part. And this is where Joan of Arc comes in. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the origins of Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc is a peasant girl from Domremy. And let's see if we can find that on the map. I believe it's in somewhere in the northern part. Her first message from God, she receives it at the age of 13. She doesn't act on any message at that point in time. Now, she is on the side of the Southerners. And as I told you before, we're looking at a situation where it's England and Burgundy versus the south of France. So the mid-south of France. Okay, so Joan of Arc is famous for leading an army. right? So God tells Joan that she will lead the army, that she is going to make Charles VII king, that she's going to get him to where he needs to go. So Joan basically requests an army from the Dauphin, so the king's son. And now the question becomes, so she shows up, and one of her compatriots was a messenger to the Dauphin. So he tells the Dauphin about this girl who says that she can lead an army and she can get him to Reims. And so now the question becomes, how do you prove that you've actually heard the voice of God? So the clerics start questioning Joan, and they question the vision of her nature, the nature of her visions, as well as what type of person she is. So they're looking at what she saw, what she heard, but also who is she. And so all that checks out. And now they just need one more thing. They need some kind of miracle. So what happens is that Joan tells the clerics, she says, well, there's this town where there's a sword. And she tells them that St. Catherine has told her this. She says, St. Catherine told me about this town where there's this sword, and I need to get this sword. So they go to the town, and indeed, there's a sword, and she gets the sword. So they took that as proof that she was indeed the person fit to lead the army. So the Dauphin gives her an army, Charles VII, and this is crucial for him because if he loses this battle, he could very well be killed, and that's it. He won't become the king of France. So, to put his faith in Joan, who at this time is 17 years old, was really quite a feat. Let's not forget how women were treated in the 15th century. Basically, no rights, no respect. So the fact that a woman was leading the army was just crazy. So he gives her an army, and Joan wants to move on to the town of Orléans. And she leads the siege, succeeds, and then she wants to move on to Reims. I should also mention that before the siege, she did send a letter to the British saying, let me pass and let me bring Charles VII to Reims and have him crowned as king and, give us back France and everything will be okay. Of course, the British just laughed at the whole idea of just some girl sending them a letter saying that, do this or else. So, okay, let's see. Okay, so she moves on to Reims and succeeds and is able to get Charles VII crowned as king. So now Charles VII is king of France. It has been properly done. Also, during the battle, Joan of Arc was hit by an arrow between her shoulder and her neck, but it didn't stop her. She kept going. So that kind of scared the British because it did seem kind of supernatural to them for them to do that. Okay, so Joan is not satisfied having won the battle at Orleans and moving on to Reims and having the king crowned. She now wants to take back France from the British. So what she wants to do is she wants to take back Paris, okay? But the king only gives her 1 day to take back Paris. So she's completely unsuccessful in taking back Paris and just has to retreat. So Joan moves on to another battle, and this battle takes place in Compiègne. And at this point, she's taken prisoner. So this is when things start going poorly for Joan. So she's taken prisoner by the Burgundians and the British. And the king no longer helps her because she's no longer producing miracles. So she's stuck in a jail cell, and she's kept prisoner for months, and they're not really sure what to do about her. So let's go to the next slide. So she's captive for months, and they finally start her trial in December 1430. And the way her trial happened is the prosecutor was a bishop. The whole room was filled with about 50 men, and it was just 50 men and her being prosecuted for heresy. So she was questioned, but she kept very quiet during her questioning, and she did talk about her messages from God. So she talked about hearing the voice of St. Margaret and St. Catherine and St. Michael. And here she makes what could be considered a mistake. She talks about the fact that she saw them physically. So now the bishop starts questioning her about how she saw them or what exactly she saw. And because these are angels, angels are not physical beings, so how could she possibly see them? So the fact that she saw them was a problem. And the more details she gave about their physical appearance, the worse it became for her. So at this point, they stop the public trial, and they lock her back up, and she's chained at her feet for a week. And then she's questioned in her jail cell. So now her private trial begins. So the prosecutor is asking all sorts of details and wants to know everything. And let's not forget, the prosecutor is a bishop, okay? So Joan still believes that God will save her. So she's 17 years old. She believes that she's been chosen by God. And this bishop is asking her all sorts of questions, doesn't have the best intentions. And Joan is answering these questions and giving details. And the more details she gives, the worse it gets for her. So the bishop, the prosecutor, declares that any angel that can be seen physically is, in fact, a demon. So he declares that what Joan has actually seen are demons and not angels. So, anyways, so Joan is tried for heresy, and she's found guilty of heresy. So she doesn't admit that she has seen demons, and she is tortured for not admitting it. Now, she's found guilty, she's tortured, she still won't admit to anything. She still claims that it's God and it's the angels and it's not a demon. So she's found guilty of heresy by the church, basically, but the church could not sanction her, could not punish her, really. The church was not allowed to kill her, so then she's handed over to the British. The church can't do it, but the British can. So the church hands over Joan of Arc to the British so that they can kill her. So Joan, now 17-year-old girl, is kind of panicking because she realizes that I'm going to die, and it's not going to be a good death. So she actually recants. And she says, sure, fine, okay, I'll say whatever you want. I didn't see angels. Just don't burn me. Don't burn me at the stake. She signed a confession. The interesting thing about the whole story of Joan of Arc is that the whole trial is actually written. So you can actually read the whole proceedings of the trial. So at this point, the bishop wants to give Joan a life sentence. Now, what happens next is not clear, but Joan becomes very frantic and kind of crazed. I should move on to the next slide. So she becomes very frantic and a little crazy, if you will. Now, some theorize that she might have been raped, and that for that reason her mind just kind of broke, and so, anyways, she becomes frantic and kind of crazy. So she's recanted her story, but now at this point she feels that if she recants, recanting is a lie. So she actually goes back on recanting and says, I was lying when I recanted. I actually told you the truth the first time. And she does this because she's afraid that she believes that if she lies, then God will be disappointed in her, and then God will punish her once she gets to the gates of heaven. So she goes back on her recanting, and she's kind of in a catch-22 now. So the prosecutor still wants to save her soul. At this point, it's too late, though. So she's in the hands of the British. She's signed a confession, then she's going back on her confession. Who knows? So they decide to go ahead and burn her at the stake. So she was burned at the stake May 30th, 1431. And while she burnt, she called out for Jesus. So that is the story of Joan of Arc, who led an army to crown Charles VII, King of France, and she fought the British, and she was put on trial for heresy, tortured, and then died at the stake calling out for the name of Jesus. So that is basically the story of Joan of Arc. So for your discussion question, I'm going to put this up there. In your opinion, who is an example of a strong woman? Please explain with a few sentences. So this person can be a historical figure or somebody alive today, or a fictional figure, or someone in your life. So just explain who you think of as a strong woman in a few sentences. And that's it for this module. Thank you.